Paige Toon. Hello and welcome to the Great Big Book Club.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
We're here to talk about your brilliant new book. Here it is, The Minute I Saw You. And it's your 18th book. I can't believe it.
No, neither can I. It's like pinch me. I don't know what I've been doing all these years. It's crazy.
Well, a lot of typing, actually, I would say. All
I
right.
know. I think I've worked out that I've typed probably about 2 million words, in my book writing career, which seems insane.
Gosh, do you bring out one a year?
It's one a year, yeah. There've been a couple of years, 4 years in total, that I've had two a year out. When I was writing a young adult series as well, and a collection of short stories. But yeah, reliably, commercial women's fiction once a year, usually May.
Unbelievable. Hats off to you. It's very impressive. And this is a fantastic book. Um, it's a sort of love story with two people who don't want to fall in love.
Yeah,
Who aren't allowed to fall in love, who are hindered from falling in love. It's a story of Hannah and Sunny, and it starts in an optician's, which is perhaps the least sexy place to start, but actually, I can see why. Can you explain?
yeah. So it's this sort of idea of going into an optician's, but you're up so close and personal with this person, and usually it's like you know a sort of bad breath kind of older man or whatever, who you're not in any way attracted to. But in the case of Hannah and Sunny, she's doing his eye test, and she looks out the window, just a mundane sort of day at work, and sees this gorgeous guy out on the pavement talking on his phone, and he comes in. And when you're really, really up close and personal, with someone like that, there's a lot of sort of eye to eye contact, and there's a little bit of a spark between them, which is, was really fun to write. But when he comes back to pick up his glasses a couple of weeks later, he's a complete changed man. He can barely meet her in the eye, and something terrible has sort of happened to him. And so, yeah, that's kind of the beginning of the book, basically, the first couple of chapters, sort of unveiling, their two stories.
But it's wonderful. I mean, obviously the eyes are the window to the soul, and it's a very, very wonderful, intimate moment. It is. They then, of course, re-meet through their friend Matilda, and then this love story unfolds. So tell me a bit about that and how you planned it, and because each character has something that stops them. We can't actually reveal that because that will ruin your book. But they do finally get together, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. So both Hannah and Sunny, that neither of them like doing long-term relationships, but for very different reasons. And while I had this idea for meeting in opticians, quite a year or two ago, the thing that really compelled me to write this book was when I came up with the idea for Hannah's backstory. And I saw this film on a plane to Australia last Easter, and there's a small sort of reference to these babies in this at the very beginning of this film. And I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning with jet lag and thought, imagine being that child, sort of in their late 20s. How would they feel about this? And I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I thought I'd love to write a character with in that scenario, which obviously I can't give away what actually happened to her, but so that was Hannah's story, and then it was a case of a lot of the different times, sort of different ideas come together, and it worked that this would be a good starting point for them. As for Sunny, he's got a very different backstory. He doesn't do long term relationships, and he's basically decided to go into therapy to try and work out what's wrong with him. And part of his therapy is deciding to take a vow of abstinence. So where Hannah would prefer to just have a quick fling and that be done with it because she doesn't want a long-term relationship, Sunny, on the other hand, will no longer do that. He's so the two of them, through mutual friends, they become friends too, and they're forced into they basically sort of have a relationship, but there's all this chemistry between them which picks up again after the initial kind of chemistry at the opticians. And that was so much fun to write. It was really kind of like delicious sort of writing about this chemistry and it being unable to go anywhere because of this vow of abstinence that he's taken, and this this avoidance of long-term relationships from Hannah's perspective. So to write about the build-up of this friendship where they really come to care about each other, and then have to get to the point of understanding what has happened to them both, and how they've kind of got into the situation where they won't have relationships, for them to care enough about each other to try and unravel, the truth. It was lovely. I think this is probably both my darkest and my lightest book to date, and I think the gap between the two things is vast, but because these characters are so sort of joyful to write, and the chemistry and the flirty banter and everything, you're never too far away from happy times. So even when it gets a bit dark, it's still hopefully a reasonably light summery read.
So yeah, unconsummated love is always the best thing to write, isn't it? Because it's got all that erotic undertension, and yet at the same time, every remark is loaded, and everything, just the brush of the skin or something is much more erotic than if you're allowed to go for it, as it were.
Absolutely. And I mean, I love a forbidden love story, an unrequited love story. That's like, that's what I love reading. That's what I love writing, so to be able to write about that kind of chemistry between these two and not have it be allowed to go anywhere, certainly not for a good chunk, that was really fun.
Really fun. So, and in this book, you also, there's quite a few sort of heavy duty issues in it. There's mental health, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's grief, there's trauma, there's sex, there's addiction, and there's homelessness. I mean, when you set out to write a book like this, do you actively think, I'm going to put these things in, or do they just crop up, or are you actively thinking this I'm going to write? Because there's a long piece in here about the homeless and eyesight, and which is fascinating actually. Is that something that you set out to do, or does it just happen?
I did for most of those things know I was going to write about them. It followed on, like Sonny's a photographer, and so that kind of prolongs the eye to eye contact. He's very attracted to Hannah's eyes and wants to photograph them. But as part of his therapy, he also wants to do something good, because he's been a bit of a sex addict. He's had problems with the drug addiction, and
he was a fashion photographer to start off with. I mean,
yeah.
he lives in that sort of that hedonistic, naughty world of fashion.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is that's his career, that's what he's doing, but he's trying to do something good. And there's a section in the book where a homeless girl walks out in the path of a cyclist, and Hannah sort of realizes quite quickly there's something wrong with her eyes. And there's discovery, like there is actually a charity called Vision Care for Homeless People, which I discovered through the research, but homeless people can't find free eye care because you need to be registered for benefits, so it's very difficult to get free eye care. And it's just like the idea of already being on the streets, and it being such a traumatic, sort of difficult situation to be living under, and then to the idea of not being able to see very well on top of that, just sort of, it shocked me to discover that. So in the book, Sonny he basically decides to do an exhibition for homeless people to raise awareness of the lack of eye care, and so he photographs homeless people's eyes up really, really close. So that was something, I had that idea in advance, because I knew he was going to be a photographer. I knew he wanted to do something good. There are, a reasonable number of homeless people on the streets of Cambridge. I live in Cambridge, so it's a reality. And so yeah, it was good to be able to highlight that issue and do something for Vision Care for Homeless People. I've done a few auctions, to raise money for homeless charities and things, so I need to do some more now that I've got some copies of the paperback. I do plan to do a few more sort of auctions, to help raise money.
That's amazing. So what you found out about the charity before you put it in the book, as it were?
Yes, and it was funny because actually it was lovely. I was contacted by the charity. I did contact the charity, to ask a few questions, and then we could just sort of continued writing it, but wanted to include the name of the charity. And then it was lovely because a couple of people from the charity contacted me saying that readers had made some donations, and were looking up to see if it was a real charity, and made a donation. And so it was really sweet. They got in contact, and I've done an interview for them. I think we've sort of made some of the optical press, a few sort of trade magazines and things. It's sort of just to help raise general awareness. It's been quite good. It's nice.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's incredible. So this is your 18th book. what is your process of writing? When do you sit down? Do you sit down? I mean, just talk me through your day and the ideas that, how do you build your books?
Sure. Well, I mean, most of my year is spent thinking about it. I just sort of like I tend to get the idea for some reason. Mostly, I get the idea when I'm writing the book before, and it just comes to me when I'm feeling in that really creative space. That's when I get most of my ideas. In the case for this one, I only got it Easter and started writing in September, so it was a lot shorter. So these characters really kind of burst into life for me, because normally I'd have a good year to really sort of be thinking about them. That's certainly the case in my next book. I've been thinking about them for maybe a year and a half, and they feel really, really clear in my mind. So I'm just desperate to get down and write it now. But and then I'll do some research, and I think just staying on top of, obviously you do various rounds of editing. So while I'm busy all year round, I actually do almost all of my writing in September, October, and November. That's when I'll write my book, and then I'm just really focused. And I should have already done most of my research by that point, so that doesn't hold me up too much. And then it's just a case of sit down and get the words out that I've been thinking about for so long. So the kids go off to school. I think it's sort of coming back to work after the summer holidays, and I'm in that phase. I'm in that sort of state of mind now, where I'm just really keen now to get stuck into the writing, and so fingers crossed, it'll be a reasonably normal term in terms of the kids going to school, because I don't know what I'm going to do if we end up having to do some more homeschooling. That was a nightmare.
Oh, wasn't it just? I mean, literally, we're all praying for the schools to open so we can actually do some work. Your background was journalism, and you were the books editor of Heat magazine during the halcyon days of Heat, which was when it was absolutely essential reading for everybody, and it was loaded with humour, and it was ironic and cheeky and naughty, and really the opposite of any of those sort of sycophantic celebrity magazines. What was it like working there in Heat Towers?
Oh God, honestly, it was so much fun. I joined Heat from Big magazine, which is like a teenage sort of celebrity magazine, and I got the job at Heat, and a week later Big closed down. And so I went in as a reviews assistant, so sort of assistant to do worked across film and TV and books and music and DVDs, and that was my kind of remit. And within 5 months the reviews editor left, and I ended up just doing her job and got promoted. So it was a really swift, and I was there for 7 years, but I didn't realise at the time, but when I joined Heat, it was actually on the verge of closing down. It was only a year old, and it was, hardly selling any copies. And then something happened, like in those couple of months after I joined, with Big Brother, kind of kicking off, and Posh Spice suddenly became like a really big thing, and our sales started to soar. So it was just the most amazing time to work at a magazine that was just, went from doing 30,000 copies a week if we were lucky to doing 600,000 a week, and it was getting mentioned by celebrities. It would be written into books, and it was mentioned in the Houses of Parliament. I mean, it was just crazy time to kind of like work at one of the sort of biggest magazines in in the world, effectively, and be a reviews editor there. It was fantastic.
But it was also at the height of celebrity culture, I think. I mean, interestingly now in sort of lockdown and COVID, they've sort of slightly lost their cachet because they aren't so visible anymore. And, and if they are photographed, they've got to be wearing a mask. But I think those really were the glory days of celebrities. It was sort of Oasis versus Blur and all that, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it was funny, that Brad and Angelina and Jennifer Aniston, like we were obsessed by, what was happening in the lives of these, famous people. And I was kind of lucky because, I remember my boss, Mike Frith, saying to me, like, celebrities on the whole hated the first half of the magazine, apart from the ones who were like reading it because they loved it too, And the second half of the magazine, which was all the reviews pages, that was the stuff that everyone loved, you know. So I was kind of like working, you know, I think if you've been working on the news desk, you were probably sort of feared and hated and detested by celebrities, you know, because you might get some terrible sort of circle of shame happening around you. Whereas on the reviews desk, you know, it was all about, you know, saying how wonderful their movies were and all the things that they wanted to be famous for. You know, that was kind of the section of the magazine that I worked on. So that was nice, you know, because you'd go to a book launch, for example. I remember, you know, publishers saying to me, the Heat chart is the chart that all of our authors, the Sunday Times chart and the Heat chart are the ones that, you know, everyone wants to be in. And that was kind of, that was a bit bonkers, because I'm the reviews editor and I'm just deciding on, you know, it wasn't based on sales, it was just based on what I thought, you know. So, and then, I mean, I had to make a joke of it, because when Lucy in the Sky, my first book, came out, I was still working at Heat. I basically delivered Lucy in the Sky and then fell pregnant and ended up having my son, and I fully intended to go back to work 3 days a week. You know, it was all lined up and ready for me, and I just couldn't leave him. And you know, and I luckily had a, you know, book deal that I just signed another 2 book deals, so I could afford to, you know, stay home and carry on. But I can't remember where I was going with that story.
No. Well, I was about to ask you how you ended up. So you after reviewing all these books, did you just suddenly decide, well, I clearly want to write one myself? Was that the idea behind it?
No, I'd always wanted to write. You know, like it was something that was the first thing I ever wanted to do when I was a child. You know, was to become an author. I remember, you know, sort of thinking, I'll go and work for a magazine and then I'll become a mum and then I'll write from home, you know. And so God knows how it actually happened, but you know, that was kind of my dream from quite an early age. And so yeah, so to you know, to be able to do that. But I do remember working at Heat and seeing all of these books coming in and thinking, you know, this is never going to happen to me, and this is going to be my biggest regret. You know, I had this idea for a book, but I couldn't imagine filling out 100,000 words and actually writing the whole thing. You know, it was too terrifying. You know, I'd start sort of writing it, you know, this idea, and then just think it was rubbish and wouldn't do any more. And I was just incredibly lucky with, you know, with how it all happened in the end. And you know, obviously a big part of that was that Heat was such a big player in the industry, so I was known amongst publishers, and I'd become friends with a publicist. You know, he was Nigel Stoneman from Simon & Schuster, and you know, we just sort of catch up and go out for lunch and stuff occasionally, and he became a proper mate. And I remember him saying to me one time, "You should write a book, love. You know, working for Heat, you get a book deal. You know," and that was when I had this idea for Lucy in the Sky, and so I shared it with him, and he said, "I love it. I'm going to go back and tell the publisher." And so within 5 minutes of me getting back to the office, I had an email from her saying, "I love the idea. Nigel's just told me the idea. You know, can we meet?" And so we met a week later, and over the course of that weekend, suddenly, you know, this idea that this might happen, my dream, which I was too scared to sort of start writing this book because I was so scared of it just never happening. You know, I wrote the first 3 chapters and a 5,000 word synopsis, and my brother came up with the title Lucy in the Sky, and met up with Suzanne, and 2 days later I was offered a 2-book deal. And that was in September 2006, and I wrote the book in 2.5 months, and we published the following April. So it was like a whirlwind, you know, like a crazy sort of, it was one of the best times of my life, working full-time at Heat and writing at every spare possible moment. And considering I was so scared to, you know, to write these 100,000, you didn't know how I could write 100,000 words. Like the book just, it felt like it wrote itself. Like once you were just in the head of the characters and, you know, just sort of letting them live out their sort of dreams and lives. And yeah, it was amazing, you know, incredible time. And I think ever since then I have written books in that window of like September, October, November. You know, I find if I give myself any longer, then I'm not productive, you know, at all. You know, like I'll just write. I won't be happy with what I've written, so I end up, you know, editing it all when it comes to September, and you know, practically rewriting it. So there's just something about those months that does it for me.
But that's not about luck though, because luck is getting a 2-book deal and then it not working. Do you know what I mean? What you had was determination, and because you know, no one ends up writing 18 books without being very focused, very determined, and you know, and talented. I mean, I think you're doing yourself a disservice there by saying that.
Well, there definitely was some luck involved, but yeah, I mean, you know,
Yes.
That's true.
I mean, it's extraordinary, and also because you and I were around at that sort of the beginning of that sort of the chick lit bubble, as it were, and now that bubble is very much burst, and it's very difficult to get books like that published. And so you've moved on to sort of uplit, I suppose. I mean, you've developed and changed over the years. It's an art form.
Yeah, I mean, very much for me, it just feels like a really like it just feels completely organic. I've just grown as a writer anyway. I know I have readers who've been on the journey with me right from the beginning, and I've had readers tell me that I think every time I publish a book, I'll have some readers saying it's my favorite, and then you've got the ones who are just hardcore, it's all about the early ones, the other ones that, really sort of stick with them more. I probably used to write a little bit more about celebrities than I do now, like that sort of, used to do sort of every other book would be, just an ordinary girl, and then the next one might have some sort of element of, celebrity in it. And, I've definitely moved away from that, and that's just been because of my interests. I basically write the books that I love to write, that I've always written for myself, and, and I'm very lucky that I have a publisher who, she just, my editor, Suzanne Babineau, I remember her saying, you write the book that you're passionate about, it's our job to sell it, and I really believe that there's always an audience out there for anyone, who wants to write the book that they absolutely love, and I mean, I'm lucky that the books that I want to write are quite commercially successful, and that I've got a career out of it, and, can afford a, nice house and stuff like that, but that is pure luck, just as to what I want to write,
Oh, listen, Paige, huge congratulations. I mean, here is the book again, The Minute I Saw You, and it's fantastic. It's gorgeous. It's great. It's light and dark. It's funny, romantic, and I'm sure it's going to sell hugely.
I really hope so. It's a bit of a strange year to be releasing a book, but fingers crossed it'll just continue to. Well, the reviews have been lovely so far, so yep, fingers crossed.
Well, no, huge congratulations, honestly. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been lovely to chat.